First of all, I want to say thank you all for coming. It's like old home week. I mean, I say all my friends out there, people I've known for 9.5 years when I first came here, and people I've met more recently, thank you so much for coming. A caveat, I am not an ornithologist. I'm not even a birder. I don't even have a bird list. I don't know how many birds I've seen in my lifetime. I have no idea. Dottie Morrison, who also lives here at Shell Point, she is a birder. She has 1,207 birds on her life list. So I'm not a birder, and I'm not an ornithologist. I'm a photographer. As you can see, I'm a photographer. And this is the sort of thing I wear when I go out to take pictures of birds, because I have all these pockets so I can put lenses into it and glasses and tissues and everything. You see? Yeah. The trick is, of course, remembering where you put everything. But I try to put them in the same places all the time. Now, I want to tell you that I started doing photography seriously when I moved to Sanibel in 1994. And I worked for the first couple of years, had a company. And in 1996, I retired, and I started doing bird photography on Sanibel using a Canon SLR, single lens camera. And then in 2002, my husband and I decided to sell Stokes. I think most of you know Stokes. Anyhow, we decided to go ahead on a 7-year motorhome odyssey, and then we took up landscape photography. And we were able to work with some of the best-known landscape photographers in the country because we would do photo tours, going to national parks and picking up photo tours doing landscape. And then at that point, interestingly enough, that was really the beginning of the digital age. That's when it came into its own. That 2002 is when we left on that particular trip. And then we switched. My husband started out with a little tiny, I forget the name of that camera, a little tiny digital camera. It was a toy. It had, when you took a picture, there was a delay. It didn't even take it right then. It took it a second or two less. It's a delay. And that's the kind of camera he had in the beginning. But it intrigued me because I was carrying around so many cans of film to have them developed and everything. I couldn't find good developers. We were in Canada and everything. But he would throw them on the computer, and he'd see them the same night. So I got a little jealous. So I started borrowing that camera, and we would take pictures of the ground between his pictures and mine, so we knew which ones were which. And so after a while, I went ahead and I got myself a digital camera too, which was wonderful. That was the beginning. Back then, it was not serious. I mean, if you were entering a contest or anything, they didn't even want to see digital cameras, the digital pictures, images. They weren't interested. You couldn't even put them in. By the time we were done and off the road in 2009, it was already fully accepted to have a digital images. And then we traveled around. In 2016, we came back to Florida and moved into Shell Point. And then I switched back from landscape back to bird photography. And then in 2024, I switched cameras because the technology, again, had changed. You know, I'd gone from the old Canon SLR to the digital. Now, in 2024, I switched to the Sony. I have an A1 mirrorless camera, which means it's lighter weight. It's lighter weight because it's mirrorless, okay? And so I switched to this. And this is an amazing camera. This one, if I went ahead and was going to take something in the air, I could actually, of course it wouldn't help if I had this on, would it? I'd have to take that off. Yeah. Well, anyhow, maybe you'll have to just imagine I took it off. No, there it goes. Okay, so I would take a picture, and I could actually, if I get on the bird's eye, the camera will track the bird. I don't have to track the bird. So it's much more effective photography, particularly flight photography. The other thing it does, it has zebra technology, which is for the exposure. So you don't have to worry about my nose and name, blow it out. You know, if you blow out the pixels and everything, you don't have to worry about that because you have zebra technology, so it helps you set the right exposure. And of course, as I said, it's lighter. So, I mean, anything this big, I used to put on a tripod. But because it's lighter, I don't have to. And now this is a 300 prime lens. It goes from here to here. And this little thing here is a doubler. So that means you times 2, okay? So 300 times 2. This is 600 millimeters, which I can hand hold, which is just absolutely amazing. I also do put it sometimes on a tripod, depending. But So that's my camera. Give you an idea of what we start with here. I also did a wedding recently, but they didn't look like birds, but it turned out okay. So now, the next thing I want to do is I want to thank people. First of all, I want to thank George Waters, who is videotaping this, so that my other daughter who isn't here and other people who aren't here can see it later on. And then I want to also thank my daughter, Denise. Stand up, Denise. She looks a lot like me, doesn't she? Turn around. Years ago, her sister told her she was adopted, but as she got older, there was no escaping it. She looked like me, so she's not adopted. Anyhow, and then my daughter-in-law, Mia. Now, both very smart people. Mia has a PhD in child psychology, and what she did for me is, she's very, very good at Photoshop and everything. She checked to make sure that the pictures, the images I'm using, were large enough for this huge screen. And she made sure that the pixelization, that I hadn't over-sharpened any pictures so that you would see pixels on the screen. So we thank her for the very sharpness of this presentation. And I thank Denise for putting together the PowerPoint. Now, I have to tell you, you don't mind if I brag about my daughter, do you? I'm going to brag anyhow. Okay, so my daughter has been with Cisco for almost 30 years. Cisco Systems, do you know that's the IT company, internet and everything? Yeah. And so she's been there almost 30 years, and she's a real guru. And for the last 16 years, she's been doing Cisco Live presentations because they have these gatherings of like 20,000 people at these huge conferences around the United States and Europe, and Denise does presentations there. And every time you do a presentation, you get graded by the people who attend. And if you get a 5, that's perfect. Denise gets lots of 5s. So anyhow, for the last, almost as soon as she started presenting, she became part of the Cisco Live Speaker Hall of Fame. And then 5 years ago, she rose to the elite level. So it's the elite level of the Cisco Hall of Fame. And she was one of the first 10 in the world to achieve that status. So thank you, Denise. So that's why this presentation is going to look pretty good. Yeah. Okay. So let's start by taking a look here. Okay. Florida birds and breeding plumage. Here we go. Now that happens to be a cattle egret. Now you're going to tell me, I have never seen a cattle egret look like that. Of course you haven't, because you live at Shell Point. And this is not a rookery. This is not a place where they come to breed in general. So we're going to, first of all, before we look at birds and breeding plumage, we're going to look at 2 that don't have breeding plumage that you're all familiar with. So let's start there. Let's start with the eagle. Okay, we see eagles here, fortunately, quite often. And then we also see osprey. These birds stay in the same plumage year-round. They don't change at all. These 2 eagles, this is the ones that are behind Larson. Maybe you've seen them. How many of you have seen these eagles behind Larson? If you go down Davis Road and then you take a left on forget the name of it, Ovenbird Lane. Take a left on Ovenbird Lane. You'll come down. Their nest is right there. Now, the bird on the right is a female, and she's bigger. Yeah, the females are larger. I think she looks fiercer. Do you think she looks fiercer? I think she looks fiercer. And then the one on the left is the male. And this is the same tree, but their nest is higher up there. I took this picture by getting in my old Grand Cherokee and going through the sky roof. I was tempted to sit on top of the car, but I did decide I was by myself and I didn't think that was a good idea. So anyhow, but that's how I was able to get this picture. All right, now this is a picture of an eagle flying, and this happens to be taken at, believe it or not, the Venice dump. There's lots and lots of eagles at the dump. And this happens to be an adult. And look at that beautiful, beautiful white head and the gorgeous white tail. But again, no breeding plumage. All right, now this one was taken over at the clubhouse. Remember that little pond over by the clubhouse? And he's carrying an anhinga. See the anhinga? This anhinga had the misfortune of doing this, drying its wings, because of course they're not waterproof, and if this bird went back in the water without drying his wings, he might just sink as he dove down into the water, because they don't have waterproof feathers. So anyhow, this little thing got picked up, and And I was standing over at the clubhouse, and Denise and Mia were with me, and I was all ready to take my equipment and go home. And Mia said, "There's an eagle over there." So I zipped around, took this picture real quick, and then this eagle proceeded to take this anhinga to the grass to have breakfast. Whereupon Denise said, "Let's go home, Mom." So that was the end of that. And I didn't take any more pictures after that. So now we're going to talk about the eagle chicks. First of all, an eagle clutch, is about 1 to 3 eggs. And they lay them days apart. So that's, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, synchronous. Well, all it means is that they lay several days. They wait several days. Also, they hatch several days apart. In other words, they all don't hatch at once. So there's a birth order to consider. And survival rate, surprisingly, only 1 or 2 of them will survive. Now, why is that? Survival depends upon food availability. Food is not always, remember, most of these birds I'm going to talk about today they eat fish. So it's not usually always available every year. For example, puffins, who I love to take pictures of, they've had a problem lately, and they're decreasing in population because one of their fish sources has been dying out. So that's what happens. So it depends upon the food availability that particular year, and then it also depends upon birth order. The ones who are born first have the greatest chance of surviving. The second one doesn't have as much, and the third one, and heavens forbid the fourth one, they don't have as much chance of surviving. And then predation. That is birds of prey or snakes or rats, other things like that will eat these chicks. So that's another reason why they don't survive. And then the other one is siblicide, which means that your brother or sister pushes you out of the nest or pecks you to death. And that will also depend upon your size. If you happen to be the largest one, you're probably safe from that. If you're younger than that, you're not safe from that. Okay, they fledge in about 3 months. That's a long time to fledge. You'll see as we talk about other birds how much sooner they fledge. 3 months. The adult plumage takes 5 years to get that beautiful white head and that white tail. And in the meantime, they don't look so spiffy. Here's this little eaglet. This little eaglet is the chick born to the ones over on behind Larson. And it's the only one that survived in that nest. I don't know how many eggs there were, but that's the only one that survived. This one is a slightly older chick, and this was taken up at the Venice dump. So there's a couple of chicks. Okay, now let's look at the osprey. Again, a bird that does not get breeding plumage, right? Okay, this one, you see the chunk of fish he's got there, and look at those talons. And again, this bird does not get breeding plumage. I want you to note the yellow eye, because when I show you the chicks have orange eyes, but this one has a yellow eye. Here's another picture of an osprey. Let's talk about their chicks. They get 2 to 3 eggs. Again, a survival rate of only 1 or 2, and fledge in about 7 or 8 weeks. Very different from the eagles with 3 months, right? Okay, and adult plumage here is 1.5 years. Let's look at the chicks. This is a parent. I'm going to try this out. Hope it works. The parent on this side. See the orange, the yellow eye? I don't know. That picture is not too clear, but there's definitely an orange eye on this bird. This is the chick, and you see a speckled back, whereas this is a solid brown back. And they grow so fast. You know, these things fledge in just a matter of weeks. It's just amazing to think this little tiny chick grows so big in such a short period of time. This one, there's the parent on the right, and see the yellow eye? Look at the babies, the orange eye, see? And the speckled backs. This was taken down at the marina. And so they do breed here. And then this is a young bird. Has not fledged yet, but it's practicing with its wings. It jumps up and down the nest and flaps and flaps and flaps before it's sure it's going to be able to be all right and play. Okay, that's also down at the marina. Now, that nest is not here anymore. We used to have it every year, and it's no longer here. This is an immature osprey, as you can tell. Actually, this bird, the eye is getting a little more orange, I think you can see. But he's still got the speckled back. This was taken over at Lake Wales, which is on the east coast of Florida. Okay, so there's the pictures of the chicks at various stages of growth. Now, let's talk about birds in breeding plumage. We've covered the eagle and the osprey, which do not have breeding plumage. Now we're going to look at the ones who do have breeding plumage. And we have the anhinga, the brown pelican, the cattle eagle. I want you to know this is not a compendium of all birds in Florida who have breeding plumage. I am only putting on here those birds that I've had the good fortune to be able to photograph pre-breeding, inbreeding, and their chicks. I have not put other birds in here, which I only have some pictures, not enough to make it a reasonable presentation. So you'll say, well, why don't you have this or why don't you have that? I thought about putting burrowing owls in here, but I don't know how many of you are familiar with them, but they're over on Cape Coral. But anyhow, let's see where I go. My favorite places to see birds in breeding plumage, because as I said, you're going to say, where did you see those birds? I never see those birds. Well, of course you don't, because you live in Shell Point and they don't come here. This is not a rookery. Maybe an old folks' home, but it's not a rookery. And so I go places where they have rookeries or colonies of birds that come there to breed. And my favorite one is St. Augustine Alligator Farm. Now, you think, isn't that funny that these birds would go to an alligator farm? By the way, these birds that go to that alligator farm, they don't live at the alligator farm. They only come for the breeding season, which tends to be March, April, May. But they only come for the breeding season. And the reason they come there is because of the alligators. Because the alligators actually make it safer for them to be there, because the alligators kill the iguanas. They keep away the rats, the snakes, the things that might attack these little chicks, you see. So that's why they like to be in an alligator farm. Of course, once in a while, a chick falls into the water, and once in a while, a bird that's not being careful, an adult, might get eaten. But the alligator farm feeds the alligators. They're not that hungry. They really aren't. They get fed every day. And so, by and large, birds are very safe. Another one I really like very much is Gatorland, mid-state. That's near Orlando. Same situation, alligators. Lots of alligators there. The birds are so used to the alligators. I have a picture of a great egret standing on top of an alligator. They're oblivious. They really are. And another place I've been like is Merritt Island. And this rich Brisson Memorial Wetlands on the East Coast is better known as Vieira Wetlands. You might know Vieira Wetlands. And then down here we have Wakatahatchee. That's also another favorite. And certain birds tend to go to certain places. So if I want to take wood storks, I might go one place. If I want to take roseate spoonbill, someplace else. Although there are multiple species, for example, at Alligator Farm in St. Augustine, I'd say there's probably about a dozen that mate there. And then I've also been to Fort DeSoto Park on this coast and to the Venice Rookery, which is near the Venice Dump. Yeah. So those are some of my favorite places to take pictures. Now let's look. Remember, now we're starting breeding pictures, right? Okay. First of all, I want to show you a non-breeding picture because I want you to be able to see the difference. This is a female anhinga. You can tell it's a female because she has a brown neck, okay? But she's a female, pretty bird, but she is in pre-breeding. Now, here she is. This one, by the way, was taken down at Serenity Point, down on the island. And I was really surprised to find a bird in breeding plumage right here on Shell Point. Now, you see, look at her eye. See the eye? You see that green area around her eye? That's called a lore, L-O-R-E. And then the blue eye ring. And although she doesn't have a whole lot, you see the little feathers sticking out from her neck? Some of the others you'll see are more obvious. But anyhow, so she's in breeding plumage. This is a male in breeding plumage. Now, he has a black neck. You see that? And you can see he's got that beautiful eye ring, the blue eye ring, the green lure, and then he's got these feathers sticking out of the back of his head. And the next one I'm going to show you is a female, and she's there trying to dry out her wings. She better watch out for an eagle, right? Anyhow, she's trying to dry out her wings so that she can go back in the water and dive for prey and everything. Because as I said, the rings are not really waterproof. Okay. So here we have a progression. We have on the left side here, we have the female who is not in breeding plumage. Look what happens when she's in breeding plumage. The male in breeding plumage, the female in breeding plumage. Do you see the difference in them? Not as extreme as some of the ones you're going to see, but let's look at the chicks. 2 to 5 eggs. Survival rate, only 1 or 2 again. They fledge in about 6 weeks. Isn't it remarkable to think that these little things are born and 6 weeks later they can fly? Yep. And the adult plumage takes them 3 years for the anhinga. Now, shorter than the 5 years for the eagle, but still 3 years is a pretty long time. We're going to come to some that actually get adult plumage in less than a year. Okay, so this is what the anhinga chicks look like. They're white. So there's mom, and that's mom because she's got the brown neck, it's a female. And you see the little babies there? And look, they're white, and they have black bills. So they don't look a bit like the parent. If you saw them in a nest, you probably wouldn't even know what they were. Okay, so here's a little bit older chick. Look at the size of the feet on that bird. Isn't it amazing? But they do grow into that. They grow into their feet, just like some dogs do. You know, you've seen puppies that have big feet and they finally grow into them. Same thing with this. Here's 2 of them. Now this, I want to point out, do you see that up by the head, by the mouth? You see that? It's like a hinge. See that little area there? You can't see it in the adult bird so much, but you see it more in the chick. And they can open their mouths very, very wide. I've seen an adult anhinga eat a great big bullfrog. Just in it goes, yeah. Okay, now this is a very unusual nest. Remember I told you that only 1 or 2 of them usually survive? Look at this, 5 in a nest. This is over at Wakatahatchee. This is remarkable that 5 have survived to this size. They're almost ready to fledge. And so mom and dad have worked very hard to feed 5 chicks and get them to this stage. It's just remarkable. It really is. I've never seen such a large nest of anhingas before or since. Yeah, just amazing. So there we have a little progression of the chicks from the time they're small to the time they're almost fledged. Now we're going to talk about brown pelicans. Okay, you see brown pelicans here all the time. This is a bird, and not in breeding plumage, but he's still beautiful. Don't you think he's beautiful? Beautiful white head and everything. That was taken here at Shell Point. Now let's look at what happens when they become in breeding plumage. And again, these are taken at Shell Point. So these birds you do see in breeding plumage, and the reason they would come here is before Hurricane Ian, we used to have Bird Island. It was a wonderful place for many different kinds of birds to nest, including brown pelicans. So they would sometimes fly over here in their beautiful breeding plumage. Now look at the breeding plumage. The eye color actually changes to light blue, and the head is yellow, and then they have a brown strip down here, the back of the neck. And that was taken down near the gate, actually, down going onto the island. And this is also on the island. So there's a progression, you see. Look at that bird up here. Do you see his eye color? Look at the eye color there. And see the lower area? And then it turned red with a light blue eye and that beautiful yellow head, the chocolate down the back. Quite different. Yes?
The center picture, Pat, what is that? What's it against? It's not water, it's not a tree, it's a wall?
It may have been a wall down there near the gate. It may have been a wall. I mean, I really try really hard to get unobstructed backgrounds. And don't forget, I'm probably doing this at an F5. Another word for those who are photographers and everything. I'm not doing at like a landscape. I might do it F11 or something, or F8 or something like this. But so the things in the background are blurred. And the thing I'm focusing on, hopefully, is in focus. Okay, so let's talk about the brown pelican chicks. They have 2 to 3 eggs, and the survival rate, again, only 1 to 2. And they fledge in 2.5 to 3 months, which is really a pretty long time. Not as long as almost as long as the eagle. And their adult plumage, while not quite as long as the eagle, is 3 to 5 years. So much more like the eagle. It takes a long time for a brown pelican chick to grow up. Now this. I just love this picture. I've only been able to take one picture of a brown pelican chick, and that was on Bird Island several years ago. And he's almost as big as mom and dad. Yeah. And he's very light colored. As he gets older, it'll get darker. This one's taken at Sebastian, which is on the other coast. Just happened to come across that one. Remember, it's going to take them 3.5 to 5 years, to look like mom and dad. Okay. Now the cattle egret. Now this one, I have to tell you, this is outrageous. Absolutely outrageous. Because this is a bird you see around here. Have you seen a cattle egret? They're the ones who, they push their head forward like that. They walk like that. Have you noticed? Yeah. So, and they have this straight beak, unlike the ibis has a curved beak, okay? So, but that little bird, now, wouldn't it be wonderful if we could all go from being ordinary looking once a year to being extraordinary looking? Wouldn't it be fun? I would love that. But, so look what happens. Look at that. So in breeding plumage, this bird has a purple lure, an orange and yellow beak. It has these beautiful buff feathers on the crest up there, on the chest, and on the back. Isn't that remarkable? All of that work just for a couple months. In fact, as soon as they copulate and have chicks, all starts to go away. But still, how wonderful to do it once a year. Wouldn't it be fun? Yeah. Here's a pair of them, male and female. They both look the same, don't they? Yeah, you can't tell the male from the female. They both have the breeding plumage. So there's a progression from that tiny little bird here, but nondescript. You probably never even noticed it. Look at the yellow eye. Look what happened to that. Now that bird has a yellow eye. This one has a red. So you see, this bird is somewhere between either coming into full breeding plumage or going out of breeding plumage. Someplace, because the color of the eye is getting more back to the color of the normal eye, whereas this one over here, you see, is red. So sometimes it's hard to tell at what stage the bird is in breeding, unless you see the chicks or something other like that. Okay. Now, let's look at the cattle egret chick. They have 3 to 4 eggs. Most of their chicks survive. Now you say, we haven't heard that. We've been hearing 1 or 2. Okay, the reason why most of them survive is they have a different food source. These little chicks and the parents are eating insects, grasshoppers, beetles, other kinds of insects. That food availability is more secure than the fish might be, in any given year. So most of them are going to survive because they get the food, right? Okay, they fledge in only 4 to 5 weeks, and they have adult plumage in just a year. Here's a picture of a parent with a little chick. Okay, now you say, that's a strange looking little chick. Did you happen to know that birds evolved from the avian dinosaurs? How many of you knew that? That birds evolved from avian dinosaurs? Yeah. So if it looks like maybe an avian dinosaur, well, that's why. And when this bird's born, it's almost naked. It just starts to get those little feathers as it goes along. Okay, this one's a little bit older. Funny looking, isn't it? Bad hair day, I think. Yeah. And then this is a slightly older chick. Okay? You see, so there's a progression. Look at that. And don't forget, it happens over 4 or 5 weeks. And then they fledge. So quick. Great blue heron. And didn't you think that was outrageous, that one? I think that's the most extreme one I'm going to show you. Great blue heron. This is taken over in the enclave. And this is a great blue heron in non-breeding plumage. Okay? Now here we have, look at that. Isn't that dramatic? Beautiful, beautiful. It gets a blue lure, and it gets all these lovely, lovely diaphanous plumes on the chest and on the back. Remember, they're all going to fall out after the breeding season. Okay. And then this is a pair of them. And this was taken at the Venice Rookery. And every time the male, by the way, they get the sticks and bring them in. Every time they bring a stick in, the female, they go through this whole routine, about, thank you so much, dear, thank you. And then they stick it into the nest and make the little nest and everything. But every time he brings back a stick there, she's thrilled. She's just absolutely thrilled. And then here we have another picture. This was taken, again, a mated pair. And this was taken at Wakatahatchee. Now, when I show you some chicks in a few minutes, it's actually chicks from this particular pair at Wakatahatchee. So here we have, again, up here, the non-breeding blue heron. Beautiful great blue heron, but look at that. Look at the transformation. Remarkable, isn't it? Look at that blue lure. Yeah, beautiful. Okay, number of eggs for a great blue heron chick, 3 to 5. Only 1 or 2 survive. Don't you feel badly to think of how many of these don't make it? When I was putting together this presentation, I had no idea the survival rate was so bad. Made me sort of sad. They fledge in 8 to 10 weeks, and the adult plumage on a great blue heron takes 3 years. 3 years. So what do they look like in the meantime? This is the chicks that belong to that lovely couple I showed you earlier from Wakatahatchee. These are the chicks. Look at that. Don't they have big heads, big beaks? Their body parts just seem so strange to me. I mean, do our kids have really big heads when they're born? I don't think they're this big by comparison. Anyhow, this is a little bit later on. Here we have them. Do they look like great blue herons yet? No. You might not even know what they were. You may think there's a different species. Now this is getting close to looking like mom and dad, isn't it? Yeah, they're getting closer. And when they're in a nest like that, they play along with each other and everything. It's kind of nice to watch if they haven't pushed each other out and pecked them together. Anyhow, so here's a progression from the little chicks through to the almost fledged chicks. Great egret. The great egret, this picture was taken over on Ding Darling, back when we lived there actually. So this is probably, this is taken by my Canon camera back in the 90s, okay? So that's a non-breeding bird. And see the yellow eye and the yellow lure and everything. Okay, this is a bird in breeding plumage. This happens to be a male, and he's shopping for a female. And so he's displaying, he throws these great big white diaphanous plumes up in the air, and then he sinks down, and he jumps up, and they come up again, and then he points his head, nose up in the air, sinks down, and does the whole thing again. It's like a dance to get a honey. Yeah. And so and this is another one. Look at the beautiful green lure on that, and the red eye. And this is a pair, and this was taken up at St. Augustine Alligator Farm a number of years back. And look at the beautiful, see the green lure and the red eye and everything, and look at the lovely, lovely diaphanous plumes. Sort of looks like an evening gown, doesn't it? Very pretty bird. So there we have the progression. We have up in the left-hand corner, we have the non-breeding bird, just a yellow beak, yellow lure, no plumes, no something special. Look at that. Isn't that remarkable? Okay? Now, number of eggs for a great egret, 3 to 4 eggs. Again, only 1 or 2 survive. They fledge in about 6 or 7 weeks, and their adult plumage takes about 2 years. And isn't this wonderful? Actually, Mike, this is similar to the picture that you have of one of my egrets. Yeah. So this is now look at the lure on that female egret, I don't know if it's a female, adult or female, or adult or male, but you see the lure. It's not that bright green anymore, isn't it? This bird has already copulated. This bird has already laid eggs, and the chicks have hatched and everything. It's going out of breeding plumage. So it's not as brilliant as the ones I showed you earlier. And look at the little chick. Isn't it cute? Here's a picture of a really young chick, and you can see the green skin. Do you have any problem thinking that might be an avian dinosaur chick? Doesn't it look weird? Yes. And this is one of my favorite pictures. And of course, the reason they're looking up so expectantly is mom or dad is bringing food. Yeah, look how excited they are. Now, this picture shows you what happens when the food arrives. Would you look at that? The parent is putting their beak almost into the chick's mouth, and how they keep from choking them is beyond me. And these are the noisiest birds when they're being fed and when they want food. And this also, it happens that the little chick will put its beak into the parent's mouth, likewise almost choking it. I don't know how they do this every year. I'd say after 1 year, I'd say, that's enough. Next year, I'm skipping this. I'm not going to go through this again, right? So here we have the progression of the chicks, from the little ones to the ones being fed over there. Now, they're a long way from being fledged, by the way. Green heron. Now, this one is subtle. This is not as extreme as some of the birds I've shown you. And I only add this belatedly because I didn't have quite enough time to fill the hour. So I put this one in. But the green heron, now that's a non-breeding bird. Very pretty. By the way, they're very elusive. You probably don't see them very much. They're very difficult to photograph. Really very difficult. So here we have a green heron in breeding plumage. Notice the color of the eye, the green head, the maroon chest. This one's taken in the Everglades. I used to go to Shark Valley, which used to be a really good place to go. I know you know where Shark Valley is? I used to go there, but oh, by the way, I forgot to tell you about the orange legs. You see the orange legs too? There we are. Yeah, see the orange legs? Okay, here's another one. And this one's not quite as extreme. So it's either coming in or going out of breeding plumage. There again, we have on the upper left, we have the non-breeding bird. We have the breeding bird. This one's definitely in full breeding plumage. This one in between someplace. Okay, let's look at their chicks. 3 to 5 eggs. Only a survival rate of 1 to 2. I seem to be repeating that a lot, don't I? Just 1 to 2. They fledge in just 3 weeks. From the time they're born to the time they fledge, 3 weeks. They grow that quickly. And the adult plumage, just 9 to 12 months. Look how that compares to the eagle at 5 years, or the brown pelican at 3 to 5. Yeah, okay. Now here's some chicks. These were taken at Wakatahatchee, 2 little green heron chicks. Aren't they cute? They start off kind of a gray-brown, and then they get this little fluffiness. This one's a little bit older. And this one is what I then call immature because that means it's already fledged and everything. But it's still a chick, but it's immature. It hasn't reached adult plumage yet. So there we have a progression. Little blue heron. This is a weird bird, really strange bird. And you're going to be surprised, but I took some of these pictures right here at Shell Point. That one was taken over at Ding Darling. It's got a snail or something in its beak. And this is a bird in non-breeding plumage. It's hard to believe that that's a little blue heron because to me it looks more like slate gray or a light blue. It's not really blue. Look what happens in breeding plumage. And this one's up at St. Augustine Alligator Farm. And you see here we have a blue beak. We have this wonderful crest up here, almost a purple head, and blue, and then the blue legs. Here's another one. Wow, huh? Look at that. Isn't that dramatic? Really gorgeous. So there's a progression. Again, we have up in the left-hand corner, we have the non-breeding bird. Nothing to get excited about. But hey, look. Remarkable, huh? This middle one was also taken at St. Augustine Alligator Farm. Let's look at the chicks. 3 to 4 eggs. Again, 1 to 2 survival rate. And they fledge in 5 weeks. But it takes them 2 years to look like mom and dad. 2 years for adult plumage. Here they start out white. Remember, they're blue birds. Little blue heron. They start out white. Remember the anhinga that started out white too? Yeah. So here we have a white bird. And if you saw those, would you know that they were little blue herons? No. I didn't either until mom and dad came. But anyhow, this is taken. Do you remember when the Tribby was being built and we had the Tribby Pond? That was a wonderful year for photographers. That year I got to take 23 species. Ended up being at Tribby Pond. It was wonderful, and I thought that would stay like that forever, but of course it didn't. Now we just have big green weeds there. But anyhow, so I took this over at what we called the Tribby Pond at that time. Do you see that his beak is starting to get a little bit blue? He's still very white. Now, look at this. This is how he turns blue. In blotches, like this. He becomes blotchier and blotchier until he's finally blue. So there's a progression from the white chick, finally turns blue. But it takes a while. Now, roseate spoonbills. This is fairly subtle. This is not an extreme breeding plumage. So here we have a bird, non-breeding plumage. Still a very beautiful bird. I love to see the roseate spoonbills. We can tell when it's adult because you see it's got a green head. They don't get the green head until they're mature. The other ones, they're kind of a whitish pink, but they get the green head when they're mature. They have the red eye and the pink feathers and everything. Anybody tell me why that bird has pink feathers? Tell me. Say it. Food. What do they eat? Shrimp. That's what made him pink. Okay? So that's why he's pink. Okay, let's look at the breeding. Well, he's not extreme, but he's got this lovely vermilion area of his wing. Red legs, yeah. And see there on his chest, a little bit of vermilion? And it's kind of curly, too, kind of pretty pretty. And this one is taken up at St. Augustine Alligator Farm. More obvious, the chest. So there's a progression, again, from the non-breeding bird up here in the left-hand corner to the breeding birds. Let's look at the chicks. They have 2 to 4 eggs. Again, a survival rate of only 1 to 2. And they fledge in 6 to 8 weeks. And it takes them 3 years to get their plumage. 3 years. That's a pretty long time. Not as long as an eagle, but, about the, maybe what we say brown pelicans are 3.5 to 5, something like that. So in that range. There's an adult with a little baby in front of it. Now, this is at St. Augustine at the alligator farm. And that little spoonbill, you see how short his little bill is? That's going to get longer as he gets older and flatter. You see, but look, isn't he kind of cute? I had a dachshund that did the same thing. Dachshunds start out with little tiny noses, and then they get the longer nose. Yeah. So here's a rosé spoonbill chick in the nest at Alligator Farm. Now, what happens is they're fledged. Mom and Dad say, "Thank God that's over till next year, right?" They're all gone. Oh no, they're not. Mom, here's a parent, and just nicely flying around and enjoying itself and getting a little rest. And the 2 kids come and want to be fed. So they sort of chase the parents around, even after they've already fledged, saying, "Food, Mom, food, Dad." Okay, I guess you've had kids like that too, right? Yeah, they come home again, yeah. Anyhow, so here we are with 3 progressions of these chicks. The snowy egret. Okay, snowy egret, that was also taken in Ding Darling back when we lived in the sanctuary. Yep. Jean and Kathy both lived there with me back in mid-90s, right? Yep. That's right. Okay, so here we are. And Jean's moving here, and Kathy's already moved here, because we call this East Sanibel, right? Right. Okay, so here we have this. This is taken back in the 90s. This bird's probably long gone. Anyhow, it's non-breeding bird. So what happens during breeding? These birds also change dramatically. Look at we have. Now this one's still got a yellow eye, but it's got the red lure. But look at this one, bright red lure and beautiful eye. And look at the crest of that bird, and these daffodil plumes, the tail area, the chest area, and the orangish feet. Yeah, and these birds are very, very feisty. And when any bird comes near their nest, they let them know it. So look, he says, "Don't come near me. I got chicks. I don't want you to come near me." And he's got this red lure. Look at that, yellow eye. He's raising his crest. He's got these beautiful orange feet, and he doesn't want anybody to come near his nest. And this one's even more agitated. And these are all taken at St. Augustine Alligator Farm. And it's interesting, if you go to the alligator farm, they just start to come in March. I think roseate spoonbills are usually the first. And then the other birds come, the wood storks, the snowy egrets, and other birds, tricolors and stuff. So here we have the progression. From the upper left-hand corner, the non-breeding bird, good-looking bird, but look, isn't it remarkable? That red lure, all those beautiful, beautiful plumes, and attitude. It really gets some attitude. Okay, let's look at egret chicks, 3 to 5 eggs. High survival rate. Why do they have a high survival rate when I'm telling you 1 or 2 for most birds, right? They have a high survival rate because they breed in colonies, like rookeries, like the alligator farm. They breed where there's a lot of other birds that if there's a predator nearby, the alarm goes up, right? So they have safety in numbers. So that's why they have a higher survival rate. They fledge in just 3 or 4 weeks, and their adult plumage is 1 to 2 years. There's a picture. Now, I don't know about you, but I think that that bird looks exhausted. I bet you felt like that after a long night with a kid who stayed awake all night. I have looked like that. And here we have the two little chicks. See? Yeah, that's it. That, again, the St. Augustine Alligator Farm. Here's a little chick. Look at that, the black beak and everything. And you can see a little bit of green skin. There we have, they're a little bit further along. Again, look at the size of the feet. I'm always amazed at the size of the feet. Yeah. So there's a progression from the smaller ones to a little bit older and then finally a little bit older. They're a long way from fledging, by the way. Now, tricolor heron. This is another one that's fairly dramatic, I think. This picture was taken at Ding Darling. This is a non-breeding bird. I was very lucky because it was a beautiful morning and the water was very still and I was able to get a lovely reflection. Yeah. But look what happens during breeding for this bird. Look at that. It's got a red eye. It's got this beautiful white crest. It's got maroon and gray on its chest. And you can see it's much fuller than it was before. And now this one is an overachiever. You see, remember I told you that they would go out and get sticks and everything and bring them home. How this bird thought that this would fit in his nest is beyond me. I mean, if he had been able to bring this home to the little lady, I'm sure she would have said, don't bring that even in here. That's too big. But he couldn't even get it off the ground. He tried several times to lift this, but he really couldn't. This was, again, at the alligator farm. But he's an overachiever. And here's another picture of a bird in bleeding plumage. So here we have the progression. Look at that. There you have the non-breeding bird. Nice looking bird. But look what happens. Look, we have this red eye. We have this beautiful crest. We have this maroon and shaggy plumes. The tricolor chicks have 3 to 4 eggs, again on survival rate, only 1 to 2, and they fledge in 5 weeks. But it takes them only a year to get that beautiful plumage, which I think is surprising that that's so quick. But here we have a couple of chicks to show you. Are they the funniest looking little things? They're almost naked when they first hatch, and then they kind of get, I don't know, look like rock stars. And then there's mom or dad, and you see this bird is already going out of breeding plumage. It doesn't have the nice blue bill it did have before, and its eye is not as red. And it looks a little tired. Yeah. So here, and this is why it looks tired, because this is what it has to face every day. And they yell and they yell and they're so hungry and they're demanding. They're really demanding. I mean, when you walk through the alligator farm, you see all these birds yelling at their parents and everything. Look at that. Would you do that? I wouldn't do that next year. No. No. So here's one. It's a little bit older. This one is probably fledged or close to fledging. So there we have the progression from the little tiny chicks to the one that's close to fledging. White ibis. Now you see these all the time. What do we call them here? Florida chickens. We call them Florida chickens because they're so prolific and so numerous. We see flocks of them. In fact, they're the ones, when you see them flying over at night to the Larsen. If you go over to the Larsen at sunset, you'll see about 3,000 white ibis nesting over there. Just absolutely astounding. And they come in from all over, in all directions, and they nest there. So we call them our Florida chickens. And I don't know about you, but they're always around my house. This is one I took over at the Enclave. This is a non-breeding bird. You see the kind of a pinkish legs, pinkish bill. How am I doing on time?
Fine, Mom. Great.
Oh, my goodness.
You're great.
I'm okay.
Yep.
All right. She's supposed to be telling me. There we are. So there's this non-breeding bird. Let's look at them in breeding. What happens to them in breeding is they get this red, oopsie daisy, it's going to go the wrong way. They get this red bill and very red legs. Now this next picture, I took this, remember at the Tribby Pond that we had back in 2020. And do you see this sac below the bird's bill? That's called a gular sac, G-U-L-A-R. So I'm not an ornithologist, but I do know quite a bit. But anyhow, this is a gular sac. This is a female. She only gets this sac on her for 5-6 days, and it's gone. So she is at the height of breeding plumage. So there's our progression from the non-breeding bird up here on the left to the breeding birds. Now the chicks, 2 to 4 eggs, again a survival rate of only 1 to 2, and they fledge in only 4 or 5 weeks, and they get their adult plumage in 2 years. But now here's what's really weird. These birds are born kind of a gray-brown. And so I got all these pictures over at the Tribby Pond, and look, this is probably a younger chick. It's still pretty brown, right? Okay, let's look what happens. Look at that. Now it's a brown and white, kind of a mottled brown and white. This one's getting closer to what it's going to look like as an adult. It's getting more white. So it's really strange. In fact, when I first saw these, I didn't even know that they were the same species. And it's not surprising because no two look exactly the same. Yeah. And let's look at the wood stork, our very last bird, the wood stork. And I happen to like wood storks. A lot of people don't like them, but I really do like them. This is a non-breeding wood stork. I like them because they look like something that should have existed 1,000 years ago. They don't even look current like our other birds. And I like their little pink feet. But this one is in breeding plumage, and in breeding plumage they get pink feet. This was maybe not as pink as I usually get, but pink feet, and they get this rough up by the collar. This is a much prettier picture of one in rather outrageous breeding plumage, I think. Yeah. So there we are with the progression from the upper left, non-breeding bird, to the beautiful breeding birds. Yeah. Let's look at their chicks. They get 3 to 5 eggs. Again, we only have a survival rate of 1 to 2. Isn't it amazing? Some of them only have 2 or 3 eggs, and they still have a survival rate of 1 to 2. They have 5 eggs, they still have a survival rate of 1 to 2. Very common. 8 to 9 weeks they fledge. Takes them almost 3 to 4 years to get the adult plumage. That's a pretty long time. Aren't they cute? These were taken at Wakatahatchee. Yeah. A little bit older. You think they're funny looking? Yeah. Is Ron Bowd here? Where's Ron? Ron called me one morning and he said, there's a bunch of birds over here behind me. I think you want to take a picture. I always appreciate that when people let me know. Anyhow, they were all wood storks. And they had just flown in from migration. And they were all down on their haunches like this. They're sitting on their haunches like that one bird was. And they looked like a bunch of old men watching a football game that they were losing. Anyhow, I'd like to have shown you that, but it didn't fit any place in this presentation. But anyhow, so there's 3 more. This is again Wakatahatchee. So there's a progression of the wood chicks. That is my final slide in my Academy for Lifelong Learning.